Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a tiger by the toe. If he hollers, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Not some, not half, all of them. Now, bring them all, achieve peace.
Hello, welcome to today's podcast episode. It is now 715 days since the October 7th, 2023 massacre, when Hamas terrorists stormed into Israel, murdering, burning, and kidnapping Israeli people. As we speak, 48 hostages, both alive and those who were murdered, are still being held in Gaza and being denied the most basic human rights. This podcast is an initiative of the Hostages and Missing Families Forum, created to amplify the voices of the families, share their stories, and keep the plight of the hostages at the forefront of the global attention. Each week, we bring you a conversation with a family member of those who were taken to Gaza during the Hamas October 7th attack. I am Tal Schneider, the political and diplomatic correspondent for the Times of Israel, and it is evening here in Israel, a day before Rosh Hashanah, a day before the new year begin. And as you all know, we are fast approaching Simchat Torah, the day of the massacre, the last day of the high holiday. We urge you as global citizens to raise your voices and share this episode and keep the hostages visible. Keep their stories alive. You can speak to your colleagues at work or your neighbors. You can join rallies. You can post this episode on social media or post anything else on social media. You can go into the website of the forum, of the Families Forum, and just send ideas of what you think can be done. I think every action matters. We need to keep this issue on the top of our agenda. As you all may know, in Israel, it's very high on the agenda. And also, if you would like to support the Hostages Families Forum directly, you can scan the code in the show notes, and you can see it right now. You can scan it, and you can reach the official donation page and help those families and the Israeli public sustain the global advocacy efforts for the 48 hostages. It is very important to note. The forum, myself, and everybody else who is engaged are doing it in volunteering basis. Nobody's taking any of your money. It's only for the activity of the forum. I will repeat those suggestions of how to help the families of the hostages at the end of the episode, including we will put this barcode back again at the end of the episode, so you can wait for that. Today, we are joined by Moshe Lavi, brother-in-law of 48-year-old Omri Miran, a resident of kibbutz Nachal Oz. Omri was kidnapped in front of the eyes of his wife, Lishai, and their young daughters, Roni and Alma. They were babies at the time. They actually are still babies because, and Moshe, please correct me if I'm wrong. Roni she's only turned 4. She was 2 at the time of the kidnapping, and Alma was just a couple of months old, and she's still a very, very young baby.
Yeah, Ronnie turned 4 in July, a second birthday without Omri, and Alma turned 2 in April. She never celebrated her birthday with Omri.
And Omri turned 48, I think, also in April, if I'm not mistaken. And this was actually also the last time that we saw a live video from Omri, April 2025, and also is the oldest hostage right now in Gaza. I mean, oldest from the live hostages. Is that right?
Yes, he's the oldest living hostage held in Gaza. Is one of among 4 living fathers who are held hostage. And it's difficult for us to comprehend how in day 715 we still need to speak about that. But it's important that we keep doing that, because we have no other choice.
Right. We are all waiting, in an unbelievable manner. We're all waiting anxiously, I would say, for the reunion of Lishai and Omri. I mean, just this beautiful couple. We have all seen, on the Israeli media, their photos, throughout their lives, and we're wishing for their reunion as fast as we can. But we have to say there is very little progress in negotiation in recent months. What do you think about this deadlock? Especially after the recent attack and the breakdown of the talks in, the recent attack on Qatar, and the Qatar announcement that there is no negotiation anymore.
Yeah, we are trying to gather information from policymakers, both in the US, in DC, and then of course in Israel, to understand what's the path forward. It's clear that there is prioritization of other goals in the war against Hamas and their accomplices. And while there are valued goals, eradicating or dismantling Hamas capabilities is definitely something that should have been done a long time ago, and before October the 7th. But it's a goal that can be achieved in the medium and long term. It's unclear to us whether the only short-term goal we can achieve, a goal that the government set forth in the first week of the war, releasing all the hostages from Hamas captivity, whether that's still on the table. It's unclear to us, which is why we try to gather information. But as we try to do that, we keep receiving those videos. The one you mentioned of Omri in April, and there was a photo earlier here on the screen of Omri on April 25, April 24th, when another hostage video was released, and Omri in 23. With Alma was just born. She was born the last day of March, actually, March 31st. And Alma was just born. Roni is there. That's one of their last real family photos. They sent it to me because they couldn't come to my graduation at Penn, so they were all wearing Penn swag over there, and it's unbelievable to me that we still need to speak about it, still receiving these horrific videos, and yet it doesn't shake the world, doesn't shake our policymakers in Israel, and doesn't shake enough policymakers in the US. So we keep and advocating for a deal as families, most of the families, not all of them. And we hope that we will return to that path as soon as possible.
How do you view the U.S. Engagement or involvement at this stage after Israel's strike in Qatar? Because we've seen Washington express somewhat dissatisfaction, but they avoided direct public criticism of Netanyahu or of Israel. But we've seen Steve Witkoff, the envoy. He was so highly engaged, visiting the families and talking to them. But it seems that he's a little bit less engaged lately. Is that something that you can comment on, or?
Well, I'll first comment that on the week of the strike in Qatar against Hamas leadership, the failed strike, one must mention. The White House and the Department of State and many other bodies and cabinet members of the Trump administration welcome families of hostages in DC, including in the Oval Office, including in the State Department, where we met Marco Rubio for a long conversation about what is happening behind the scenes, what is going to be the U.S. response to the strikes against Hamas in Qatar, and where are we going forward. I do think the administration is very much engaged. He's very much trying to find a path for a solution, but at the same time, for whatever reason, cannot apply public pressure on the Israeli government. I can understand that rationale. Any daylight between Israel and the US can only embolden Hamas, and I don't think it's productive or actually moving the needle. what we try to make sure is that the policymakers in the US, including Special Envoy Witkoff, Secretary of State Rubio, and of course the President, do pressure all different sides, including our Prime Minister Netanyahu, and of course Hamas through their sponsors and founders, to understand that they have to reach a deal as soon as possible.
Right, but I have to ask you that. I mean, on the news, we keep hearing from the president when he says, "I think there is less than 20 people alive now," but the Israeli public and the Israeli authorities have announced to the Israeli public that those 20 are alive, and maybe hopefully one more, maybe 21. So, I mean, how do you see those announcements from the president, predicting that some of them did not survive?
What we know is that there are 20 hostages alive, two whose conditions are unknown, and with the rest, sadly, were murdered or killed in captivity or on October the 7th. We have not received any other information from the Israeli government, from the authorities here, and we don't know where the information that President Trump relayed to the public in interviews came from. Mm-hmm. After he stated those figures, saying that some of the hostages were killed, we received confirmation from the Israeli authorities that there are still 20 hostages alive. I want to believe that we are not being told wrong figures by our own government, by our own security apparatus. That's all I can say. But there is a lack of trust, I think, between the families of hostages and the Israeli government. A lack of trust that is crippling the Israeli society overall. If, according to every poll, the government is not receiving much trust from the public, right, no matter on what issue, including hostage deal negotiations, including how the war is conducted, and of course on other social issues that are fragmenting our society. So it's hard to trust those comments by the government.
I want to show the video of when was the last time that Omri was holding his daughters on October 7th morning. You can put that video in parallel while we speak. It's a very important video because, I mean, this is the last time Omri was hugging Roni, the eldest, right? She's 2 at the photo, at the video. She's now 4.
Correct.
And this is the morning of October 7th in the house, in the kibbutz, in Omri's and Lishai house, right?
Correct. It's not in their house, it's in their neighbor's house. They were held captive with another family in the kibbutz, whose eldest daughter was murdered, whose the father of the family was kidnapped and murdered in captivity. And the terrorists simply took the phone of one of the members of the family and live streamed it on Facebook. We were not aware of it at the time. We didn't have contact with Lishai and Omri's neighbors, the Dan family. But a few days after October the 7th, we understood that video was taken. It was very difficult to watch, but it's also the last moments of Omri with his daughters, with Lishai, and I wish we could have better videos, but with them together again. But of course, not being filmed in such horrific conditions, being abused by Hamas terrorists who invaded their kibbutz in Nachal
And you can see the horror in Omri's eyes. I mean, this is actually, as I'm going to repeat what you just said, it's taken by the terrorists. If you don't understand that, they were taking videos of the people that they were taking captive, and it's really horrific. But your sister Lishai, she's been tireless. She is, we see her all over the country, in speaking at rallies, meeting officials. Sometimes she has to leave those two little babies and travel to the United States. She's constantly campaigning. How do you see her from watching her from afar? I bet you keep on a daily contact on a daily basis. You're stationed in the United States, but you probably see her also on the media all the time.
Yeah, we are in contact daily. We strategize together. We speak frequently about meetings we are holding, about rallies we're attending, about speeches we need to deliver. When we are together, whether in the US or in Israel, we campaign together as well. She'll be coming here next month to DC on October the 7th for an event we are holding as families in Washington, D.C. It will be a big event and hopefully will be well attended by the administration. And the point of that event is not to simply mention October the 7th. It is to continue urging policymakers to understand that there are human beings held captive, that there are families who are still shattered. There are people waiting and campaigning relentlessly across Israel and worldwide to bring home their loved ones. And we are supported by so many other people who are volunteering, who are showing their love throughout this horrific time, nearly 2 years. So yeah, we work together, if you will. It became kind of a work for us because it's very demanding, and we have to do it while dealing, of course, with the emotional toll and with a lot of bureaucratic logistics issues that come with becoming a family of hostage, a family that survived October the 7th. My entire family was there in Sderot, in Nachal Oz, in Oranel, and being so close to all that has engulfed on that day from every respect. So we keep campaigning, and I'll continue being our voice wherever I can.
Can you describe to us what a day is? What a day looks like for Lishai, and with the two babies at the house. I mean, she has to put them, I guess, to school and kindergarten, and she still need to campaign. How does her schedule look like? It's crazy.
Yeah, she's been saying ever since October the 7th that she has two jobs. One is being a wife of a hostage, and the second being a mother to Ronnie and Alma. It's very complicated to balance it. It's very difficult for her. She has to make compromises all the time on one or the other, and yet she has to at times choose to be that wife of a hostage and go to a meeting, go to travel internationally, and those sacrifices are so difficult for her, and yet she's handling it amazingly. I'm really inspired in awe of her ability to balance everything and still be an incredible mother to Ronnie and Alma. And as Ronnie and Alma grow, they ask more difficult questions.
Of course.
They speak more. They draw. They speak of they share their dreams. Ronnie shares her dreams of Omri. She still remembers him. She still remembered that day, even though she was so young.
And Alma cannot remember it, right? She was a couple of months.
Alma cannot remember it. And for her, Omri is a poster.
It's a poster.
She knows she has a father. She saw photos of Omri with her when she was a baby, but she doesn't know him. She doesn't know how it is to have a father around. And as she grows, she speaks to a poster as if that's her father. And eventually she will understand as well that he was taken hostage if he will not return in time for him to explain her when she grows up what has happened on October the 7th 2 years ago.
Moshe, you also personally have met, diplomats, officials, leaders all around the world, in the US, but also outside of the US. How do you feel like your message is being heard? Do you feel that, people are still on it? Is it more difficult to get those meetings, when we're approaching the 2 years mark?
Um, Let me start by saying that, irrespective of my criticism of the Israeli government, and I find many of their conduct before the war and throughout the war counterproductive, to say the least, to the national interests of the state of Israel. Irrespective of that criticism I have, I find the international community as a whole to have failed us on October the 7th and ever since. They have emboldened Hamas and their accomplices in every turn. They may meet families of hostages. They may show some empathy in those meetings and then in their statements thereafter. But when it comes to policies, they have not taken the difficult decisions that needed to be taken immediately after October the 7th. Immediately after October the 7th, funds should have been frozen without us needing to campaign for it. Qatar should have been isolated diplomatically to be pressured
Immediately.
without us needing to call for it.
Yeah.
The same for other Hamas sponsors, countries like Iran and Turkey. Turkey continues to receive a blank check, it's very frustrating to see how the international community has handled itself, how the ICRC handled itself. Again, they say a lot of good things, but it's not enough to say things. They need to pressure the relevant stakeholders and show receipts that they have done so. So while many families of hostages, including myself, have criticism of our government, I think many of those meetings with policymakers worldwide have not led us to where I wanted it to lead. And I think it only emboldened Hamas at the end of the day. When it comes to the US, I think both the Biden administration and the Trump administration have done a lot to support us, to change things, to promote ideas for deals. But there are still 48 hostages, and I hope the Trump administration will continue to show its support in practical terms in continuing to pressuring all different sides of the equation.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Also, I found it amazing that it was a bipartisan issue immediately in the United States. It's not to be taken for granted by us. I mean, it's in Israel. I mean, it's widely supported by the public, but it has become a partisan issue with the political sides of the politicians, not the public. And in the United States, it's really bipartisan, and it's it's such a human tragedy, I guess. So everybody are attached to it.
I agree. And then we
So
see it also in rallies on Sundays across the US, whether here in New York, in DC. I went to Boulder, Colorado a few months ago after the terrorist attack against that community, and saw the support and love that community gives to us, the families of hostages, and it gives us a lot of strength. And I call all listeners here to keep showing up wherever you can, whether on social media, but also on the streets. I don't want people to call calls of revenge and hate. Our message is very clear. We demand Hamas to release the hostages. We demand our policymakers to bring them home. And we want to see an end to this ongoing war. And because that's the only way to bring home the hostages.
right.
War cannot be an end of itself. It needs to be the means to achieve a strategic goal. And at the moment, also according to the security apparatus and in Israel, a lot of what could have been achieved in the battlefield was achieved. What we need now is a strong diplomatic initiative and that incorporates the release of the hostages.
Right. Let's talk about Omri. I should have done it earlier in the conversation, but things that you were telling us are so interesting. Just tell us about him. He's 48 years old. We see the photo all the time. I'm sorry. We really want to see the man behind those photos. We only get those, still images and the live video that we get from time to time, but we desperately want to meet Omri. Who is it?
Omri was kidnapped when he was 46 years old. He was born in northern Israel, but moved to the south around 2014 and built a home in Kibbutz Nachaloz. He loves nature. He loves hiking and traveling. He had an extensive bookshelf of books. His favorite author is Hiroki Murakami. He had all his books in the library, which was partially destroyed on October the 7th. Loves basketball. He would never miss a match of Maccabi Tel Aviv. Avid supporter. Loves football as well. A man you would love to have a beer with. Had this unique smile and laughter, kind eyes, bashful eyes. He's a shiatotherapist. He has his own clinic in Nachaloz. And he was also a gardener in the kibbutz, so he was healing both plants and human beings. That was his living.
Wow.
Golden hands. He met my sister Lishai in March 2020 in the last party before the country was shut down because of the pandemic. They met in a Purim party. It wasn't their first meeting, but they met a few years earlier, but was their meeting where they fell in love with each other. And very quickly, perhaps because of the pandemic, they became so close to each other and decided to build a family together. They brought to the world Roni. Then they got married in Kibbutz Nachaloz in the pool area. Beautiful wedding. You can see that it's from the wedding day.
Amazing.
Different time, both in the kibbutz for our family. I don't know if we'll ever return to those, moments as a family, and also all the communities in the south. Be hard to return. And
obviously, Lishai lost. I mean, her husband is in captivity, but she also lost the house. She is out of the kibbutz, like all of the kibbutz. And where does she live right now?
Yes, on October the 7th, luckily Lishai and the girls were saved. They were rescued by the IDF. As you could see earlier, they were also held captive in that house. And at some point that day, the terrorists decided to take Omri, Tzachi Dan, and two other women, Judith and Natalie Ranan, and they told the rest to stay put or else they'll be shot. They told them they can't leave the home or else they'll be shot, etc. So they were held captive for a few more hours. And eventually that evening were rescued, and Lishai ended up in Kibbutz Kramim. It's very close to Be'er Sheva and Lav. And she's there ever since. She's there with my parents, who survived in Sderot, rescued the following day. And they still live there to support my sister. And my other sister, Michal, was also displaced for a long time, but she decided to return to Kibbutz Or Ner a few months ago with her husband and my nephew. So that's our family's story of that day. And then the story of displacement is still ongoing. People forget that. The entire Kibbutz Nachaloz is still trying to rehabilitate, but it's not a community anymore like it was before.
The people are still dislocated internally.
Yeah, they're still internally displaced across Israel.
Yeah. And now in that photo, we see Omri's father, who is also a big figure in the fight for Omri release. We keep hearing him and Lishai all over the media. I was just listening today to a podcast for an interview with Liri Albag, who was a soldier. Liri Albag, it's a woman soldier. She was just 18 when she was kidnapped, and she was held captive, I think, for 470 days. One of the women soldiers who were released January 2025. And in that podcast, she said that while she was being held in Gaza, she was, for 5 months from that year and 4 months, during 5 months of that time, she was allowed to hear the Israeli radio. And since she was listening for 5 months for the Israeli radio every day, she heard Lishai all the time. And she could, she was hoping, she was writing down in a notebook whatever Lishai said on the radio. She was hoping she will, encounter Omri in captivity, and she will tell him, I hear your wife, she's talking about the kids, she's talking about you. Never happened. She was hoping to meet him, but she also said that her she will not gain back herself unless she gets Omri and the rest 47 hostages out. So the Israeli hostages who came out are unable to recover as long as we have people in. And I'm just hoping that somehow Omri is being able to hear his wife, his amazing and brave wife, during this period. Do we know anything? Does he get to hear the media?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. And, we hear a lot of different small bits from return hostages, both in private conversations and then, of course, publicly. We received a lot of information from Keith Siegel, was held with Omri until July 24th. It was a long time ago, sadly, but July 24th.
So they were held together for what, like 6-7 months?
For several months, they were held together. If people recall, in April 24, in the video that Hamas released of Omri, it was also of Keith. And it was taken in the same place. And the terrorists let him watch a press conference we held at a time in Osh Square, where Lishai and Dani were speaking. We were holding Omri signs behind them. And the Siegel family was also there speaking. And we understood when Keith returned that at times they let them watch some things. It wasn't very often. It was in very specific moments in time. But that's how at least he saw Lishai. And Keith said he was disappointed we didn't bring Ronnie and Alma to the press conference so that he could see them. But naturally, we did not want to do that because they're just children. It's difficult to bring them to such situation. We didn't even think about that. But
yeah, when you say that, I just remember that what Liri Elbag said in this interview. She said she was listening to Lishai talks about the girls, about Ronnie and Alma, telling on Israeli radio about their Purim costumes, what the girls wore for Purim in costumes. And she could tell that Ronnie, the eldest daughter, only 4 years old now, wakes up in the morning and say good morning with her face towards Gaza. Maybe daddy will hear her. So she could, Liri Elbag, again, the soldier captive woman, she could cite Lishai with all those little details. And she was hoping to meet Omri and tell him, what they wore for Purim, what they're doing in their morning's routine and so on. So that was kind of a story that, we really, really hope, to have Omri back and hear from him and, obviously save him first and foremost, save him because, it's very, very dangerous in those dungeons, in those tunnels.
It's very dangerous, and as the fighting intensify again, just like many other families, we echoed our concerns publicly that the intensification, the new operations in Gaza City and potentially the central of the Gaza Strip as well will risk the lives of the hostages because Hamas stated clearly that they are going to be used as shields, and that they're going to transfer them to the areas of conflict, and that they'll be executed. And we know that hostages were murdered in cold blood in captivity. That the most shocking one was last August, after families were warning policymakers things like that may happen in Rafah, because we are entering that territory, and what we may be able to achieve in the future there cannot be achieved at the expense of living hostages and deceased hostages' bodies. And that's exactly what happened at the end of the day with the murder of 6 hostages there. And a few weeks earlier, people forget there were other 6 hostages of primarily elderly men, but not only. There were, I believe, also 2 younger hostages whose bodies were recovered, and they were all alive when they were taken.
Right. They were shot.
They were all alive.
Yeah. So many of the hostages were shot by the captors once, they heard military, or they thought that, something is happening. And I mean, it's a very difficult time this week, specifically with this new operation in the northern part of Gaza. Moshe, when we have people listening from all around the world, I saw someone here.
Yeah, and I see the messages, and thank you so much for everyone.
Yeah, from someone from Brazil, I think, and some, from the United States and from other places. What do you think, international audience? People also may, you can send this episode to your friends, and people can listen later on. So what do you think people, who are listening to this, what can they do?
I think you started this episode with exactly the words we use. We need people to continue rally and show up physically. There are Run for Their Lives events in many cities worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
And if there are not in your place where you live, you can, of course, hold one, enter the Hostage Families Forum website, Run for Their Lives website, and understand how you can set up a rally like that, usually on Sundays, to show support for families of hostages and for the hostages themselves. You don't know how much it uplifts the families who are seeing it from Israel. No matter how small the crowd is, it uplifts families. Want people to be engaged on social media, to post about the hostages, and again, not to use them as props for propaganda or for advancing messages that most of the families disagree with. They need to be used to advance messages of bringing the hostages home. We have a lot to hold accountable Hamas, their accomplices, their sponsors and funders. But the priority now is to save lives and ensure that deceased hostages whose bodies are held captive as well are brought to proper burial and are not lost like Ron Arad. And, I grew up on that notion that we will left Ron Arad behind. That was a scar in the Israeli ethos, in our hearts. And people were, I just remember how it affected people even long after it happened when I was a kid.
Right.
And now we're talking about 48 Ron Arads, potential Ron Arads. We can't let it happen. We want people to write to their elected officials. No matter how young or old you are, you can write to them. And I give people an example of when I wrote to my elected official as a teenager. I was studying in an international boarding school at the time in Norway, and I had Palestinian peers with me from Gaza. And the Prime Minister at the time was Ehud Olmert. And some of my fellow students could not leave the Gaza Strip in order to join us in school. And that bothered me because I didn't want people to think we're preventing people to advance their education. So I wrote to my Prime Minister. I didn't expect him to answer. But Prime Minister Olmert did answer. And these students did receive the permits to join us in school.
Oh my God, that's an amazing story.
I just tried...
So you were actually helping people in Gaza to get out and study abroad?
Yeah, I was 16, I was 17. I was 17 at the time.
Wow, amazing.
And I just give that as an example for people that even if you are young, you can write your elected official and you never know who and how they'll respond. And I urge everyone to keep writing. Even if you feel it's pointless, they need to keep receiving those emails and letters and phone calls that they have to do more to bring home the hostages. They have to do more to pressure Qatar, Turkey, Iran. They have to do more to pressure the Israeli government. And most importantly, to hold accountable Hamas and their accomplices until they release all our loved ones from captivity.
I will add to that, Moshe, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Tomorrow night, all over the world, Jewish families are gathering to celebrate Rosh Hashanah. So you can, you heard the story of Omri, you've seen his lovely daughters, you have seen Lishai with her fight. Tomorrow night, you can take the story of Omri and talk it over in your dinner table. And maybe, with the families gathering, do like a brainstorming on what can you do. You can, get advice from your aunts, uncles, cousins, and maybe
you never know who they know. People don't know who they know.
You can do something together. You can do as a family. You can, you can make a decision. You have a lot of Sundays and upcoming, holidays. You as a family, you can, as Moshe mentioned, you have to only to Google "Run for Their Lives" and go to the website and find a rally in your area. It's usually on Sundays in parks, and you can just join it as a family, as a group. And as I said, you can just send this podcast if you you don't want to get out. That's fine. You can just share images of Omri, share images of other hostages, keep this issue alive, talk to your people, talk to your, at the synagogue or at the country club or at your, at your JDS or, everything with J. Just talk to people. And also, please, you can scan the barcode of this episode and of the Hostages Families Forum website, and you can just help them with little help to keep this issue alive. They're financing, they're helping Lishai travel around the world. She's going to DC next month for the 2 years mark. So you can just, you're helping her. You're helping her get there. And Moshe, let me just finish up by saying that we are admiring Lishai for her bravery and the way she presents the issue. I've seen her in rallies. I went, I'm seeing her from afar. She never wanted to be a celebrity, but everybody knows who she is these days. We need this episode to, this tragedy to be over. We need to see Omri at home with his family, being hugged by his daughters and his wife. So with that, there's anything else you wanted to say?
No, I think you concluded very well. Just we need people to keep being our voice, our shield, our armor, wherever we go and wherever we can't go. We need you to speak up and support the right messages of bringing home the hostages, ending the war, and holding Hamas and their accomplices accountable.
Thank you. So I just want to thank this, Rachel. I think she's commenting now that she went to every rally in Maryland every Sunday before we moved to Israel. So thank you, Rachel. And I want to thank everybody from who is listening to us, who is doing their efforts, and bring some more people to it's not a political issue. It's just straightforward humanity to bring those people. In the Israeli public support, it's in huge percentage, like more than 70%. And we need to, it will bring a ceasefire as well, I hope, and maybe an end to these horrific scenes that we're all seeing. So Moshe, let's hope for better news from the new year, from Rosh Hashanah. Maybe it will bring, some blessing and a change. And I want to thank you for sharing this story of Omri. And That's it. You can join our next episode for this podcast next week on a Sunday evening in Israel, midday in the Eastern time, morning in Pacific time. Join us next week again. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you, Tal. Shana Tova.
Thank you. Shana Tova.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a tiger by the toe. If he hollers, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Not some, not half, all of them. Now, bring them all, achieve peace.